Well, hello, hello. I'm Aaron. I'm one of the pastors here, and welcome. Welcome for those of you that are in the room, for those of you that are joining us online this week. I am super pumped to talk about this particular message, Kill the Calf, where we celebrate life change, and I'll get more into that here in just a moment. But I don't know about you, as I think through this particular series, my personal life, this series has been very impactful for me personally, and I've gotten a lot of feedback from other people in other life groups that have shared that it's been very impactful for them as well. We did this series the very first time in January, going into February of 2020, and then something called COVID happened. And so for some of you, this is brand new. And some of you I know heard it in 2020. I heard it in 2020. We talked about it leading up to 2020. But this time, for whatever reason, this has just hit me differently this time. Maybe it's our emphasis on discipleship and what that looks like has hit me differently. But when we talk about these core values, what we're really talking about are these things, these ways that we want to engage as Christians. And how us as Christians and part of the Refinery Christian Church, the small c, Refinery Christian Church, how we want to be, how we want to operate. And so these have just come to mean a whole lot to me. Now, I say that earlier, threw me back to 2020, and I went through our communion prep area this morning, and they were actually back there prepping communion. And I literally had a flashback to 2019, 2020. And so just some really cool stuff to celebrate today. And being a part of this church, but also visiting a number of churches through the years, as I've traveled around in the military and even on sabbatical and visited other churches, there's a lot of times I recognize as a church, or the capital C church, there's a lot of times we don't celebrate the right things. A lot of times we look at the wrong things to celebrate. It doesn't mean that they're necessarily wrong, but it's a wrong thing for us to celebrate. Again, that's why I love these core values, and this one in particular, as we talk about celebrate. This is actually probably the first core value, as Chad was revamping our core values, that came to him. I know he had a conversation with me and then with our staff, just really what this would look like to celebrate life change. And that's when we made this transition specifically for baptism. And for those of you that have been around, and even as you walk through the lobby already this morning, you probably noticed some confetti on the floor. What does that mean? That means somebody made a life-changing decision this morning and was baptized. And I don't know if we have any after this service, but I know we have a family getting baptized already after the 11:30 service. They came and talked to us last week. So cool. And then to be in here today as well, and you got to see the video. I'll get to see it live as well next service, but to see 14 kids dedicated, where families are just making this decision that we want to raise our kids in a godly way, and we want to partner with the church, and we're asking the church to partner with us to help us raise our kids in a Christian environment. And so to me, that's very, very exciting. So I'm going to be reading from Luke chapter 15 here in just a moment, but before I get there, I want to unpack this chapter just a little bit. As Chad said in his intro video, man, wasn't that some amazing looking food in his intro video? I'm kind of jealous. Anyway, sidetrack there. As I read this passage, again, as he mentioned, it's probably a story that a lot of you have heard. The lost son or the prodigal son. Prodigal simply means wasteful. In my particular translation, there's headings above each parable. Those were not originally written by the writers. Those were added later so we could have a better understanding. But what I find interesting about chapter 15, it's not a parable, it's a collection of 3 parables or 3 stories that Jesus tells. And they kind of build. They all begin painting the exact same picture. And it starts off at the beginning of chapter 15 talking about how Jesus is going around and teaching. And of course, we know there are a lot of his followers or people that are coming to listen to him because they're interested, they're intrigued by what he has to say. But then it also tells us that there are religious leaders of the day. There's Pharisees there listening to him. And they're listening not because they want to learn, but because they want to try to find something they could pin on him, something that's a violation, something they can go after him with. And so it starts off in the very beginning, even before it starts telling the stories, that in the midst of this, these religious leaders are already complaining, going, who is this guy? He's hanging out with these sinners, with these tax collectors. Not only is he hanging out with them, he's sharing a meal with them. Who does he think he is to be able to do that? And then Jesus begins telling a story about the lost sheep. That if a shepherd had 100 sheep and one of them wandered off, he would leave the 99 to go find the one. And then he goes into a story of the lost coin and this lady that has 10 coins and loses a coin inside of her house and how she goes through all this effort to find it and sweeps every inch of her house to find it. And then we transition into this story, the parable of the lost son. Beginning in verse 11, it says, to illustrate the point further, Jesus told them this story. I'm going to pause right there just for a minute. That again is a clue to us. This is pointing back to the stories previous to it, going, all these are trying to prove a point. All these are trying to help the religious leaders of the day, as well as others that are listening, like this very specific point that Jesus is trying to communicate about who God is and who Jesus is. And then Jesus goes on and he says, a man had 2 sons. The younger son told his father, I want my share of your estate now before you die. So his father agreed to divide his wealth between his sons. A few days later, the younger son packed all his belongings, moved to a distant land, and there he wasted all his money in wild living. About the time his money ran out, a great famine swept over the land, and he began to starve. He persuaded a local farmer to hire him, and the man sent him into the fields to feed the pigs. The younger man became so hungry that even the pods he was feeding the pigs looked good to him, but no one gave him anything. When he finally came to his senses, he said to himself, at home, even the hired servants have food enough to spare, and here I am dying of hunger. I will go home to my father and say, Father, I have sinned against both heaven and you. I am no longer worthy of being called your son. Please take me on as a hired servant. So he returned home to his father, and while he was still a long way off, his father saw him coming. Filled with love and compassion, he ran to his son, embraced him, and kissed him. His son said to him, Father, I have sinned against both heaven and you. I am no longer worthy of being called your son. But his father said to the servants, quick, bring the finest robes in the house and put it on him. Get a ring for his finger and sandals for his feet, and kill the calf we have been fattening. We must celebrate with a feast, for this son of mine was dead and now has returned to life. But he was lost, but now he is found. So the party began. Meanwhile, the older son was in the fields working. When he returned home, he heard music and dancing in the house, and he asked one of the servants what was going on. Your brother is back, he was told, and your father has killed the fattened calf. We are celebrating because of his safe return. The older brother was angry and wouldn't go in. His father came out and begged him, but he replied, all these years I've slaved for you and never once refused to do a single thing you told me to. And all that time you never gave me even one young goat for a feast with my friends. Yet when this son of yours comes back after squandering your money on prostitutes, you celebrate by killing the fattened calf? His father said to him, look, dear son, you have always stayed with me, and everything I have is yours. We had to celebrate this happy day. For your brother was dead and has come back to life. He was dead or lost, but now he's found. Man, what a powerful, powerful passage for us. And I want to take a little bit of time and really look at 3 specific characters from this story. And I want to begin by looking at the younger son. So the younger son goes to his dad and says, Dad, my time's here. Give me my part of your inheritance that you're going to leave me. Go ahead and give that to me now. Now, that was not typically what would happen in that culture. Typically in that culture, once the father passed, the inheritance would be distributed the way it was supposed to be distributed. However, it was not totally uncommon. There were some instances, even in this culture, where a dad may decide, I'm going to go ahead and give my inheritance to my kids now, and I'm going to let them experience it while I'm still alive. So for whatever reason, the father agrees and says, okay, I'm going to give you your portion of the inheritance. And I can't help but think that in this moment, it's me as a teenager. Some of you can probably relate to this. When I thought, man, I can't wait to be an adult. I can't wait to make all the decisions. I can't wait till I'm making my own money or I have my own money. I can't wait to the point that nobody else can tell me what to do. Man, life is going to be great when I'm an adult. right? And then I started adulting. And I've had this conversation with my son a lot. As he said that, man, being a kid was so easy. I didn't know how good I had it. And there are times I wish that too, that I could just go back and just be a kid and not have the responsibilities and have to make some of the decisions that I have to make. So if you're a teenager, younger in the audience, just don't rush it. Enjoy it. But in this moment, the younger son loses some things. And so here's what he lost. First, he lost his home. Now, it was a voluntary loss. He walked away. He got this inheritance and is like, I'm out, peace out, I'm gone. I'm going to go do my thing. And it says he went to a distant land. So he walked away from his home. He walked away from whatever accountability there was in that household, whether that was from his dad or from his brother or even other people that were around him. But he walked away from what was into this distant land. Secondly, he lost his father. When he asked his father for his portion of the inheritance, in a sense, what he was communicating is, Dad, you are dead to me. You're dead to me. I no longer want to have any part of you. I want you to give me what I'm entitled to, and I'm going to go live my life. Now, there's one of the reasons that he probably did that is because he was the younger brother. He probably was not going to get the property, this farm or whatever it was that they ran. Typically, he knew when his dad died, the older brother would have gotten that. This younger brother would have primarily gotten probably money. And so in a sense, he's like, Dad, as far as you're concerned right now, you're dead to me. I'm going to go and start my life now. I'm not going to wait till you physically die. I'm just going to make that separation now. So he walks away from his father. In the midst of that, he also lost his self-control. It tells us in the text that he went and blew all his money with wild living. And then later in the story, the older brother goes, Dad, he spent it all on prostitutes. What are you doing? So he lost self-control. And in the midst of that, he lost everything. He lost every bit of money that he had. Every bit of the inheritance is gone. And in that moment, whatever friends were around him, he lost as well. Because there were probably some people that came around him that wanted to hang out with him as long as he was helping pay the bill for the party. You know, I'm here with you. And as soon as the money was gone, the friends were gone. Because it tells us he found himself alone. He was alone, and there was nobody to give him anything, nothing to eat. And then there's the turn in the story where it says, he came to his senses. He came to his senses. There's this moment, he's still in the distant land. The famine set in. He doesn't have anything to eat. He's hungry. And he says, wait a minute. Something's not going well here. I'm not a big Dr. Phil fan, but there is a tagline that he likes to use. How's that working for you? That's kind of the question in this moment, that if somebody was looking into this, how's that working for you, walking away from everything? But here's what we see in this turn. There's some things that he still had. There's still some things that he had that we began to see emerge that we didn't know he had until this moment, he comes to his senses. And the first thing that we see is that he still has this willingness to work. It doesn't say he's going around begging somebody for food. He gets to the point that he recognizes, hey, if I don't do this, if I don't go find it myself, it's not going to happen. So I'm going to go to work. And he went and found a local farmer and said, hey, what can I do for you? And the local farmer said, hey, go feed my pigs for me. So he had this willingness to work. It's really interesting if you think about it. These religious leaders would have been Jewish. And so for them to hear this story and hear pigs in this story, you got to remember what the Jewish people felt and feel about pigs. This unclean animal are part of the story very specifically, very intentionally. I don't know if you've ever fed pigs or slop pigs like we called it in North Texas where I grew up. I've told you in the past, I lived on a little piece of land with my parents. When I was growing up, ours was more of a garden. My granddad had a farm on the other side of the road, and he farmed, and he had livestock, and he had pigs, and I still very distinctly remember and can still kind of smell it at times. He had this 55-gallon drum that was right out by where the pigs were, the pig's pen. And that had everything that my granddad could get given to him that was spoiled, whether that be milk from the dairy, bread that was about to go bad. It didn't matter what it was. If it was expired and they were setting it out, my granddad went around and collected it, and all that went into this 55-gallon drum. That 55-gallon drum sat outside in the sun, in the heat, even in the summer, and it was quite aromatic, and not in a good way. But I still remember as a kid going over there and watching him scoop in, old farmers, cut out gallon of milk. You could turn into a scoop if you just cut part of it out and you still have the handle. And he would scoop in there and throw that. I don't know what they fed pigs back then, but I'm sure it wasn't very good, wasn't very appetizing, because pigs will pretty much eat anything you throw at them, right? And it tells us in this story that while this young man is there feeding the pigs, that he's so hungry that it says he desired to eat even what the pigs were eating. And that's when he goes, wait a minute. And that's when we see the second part. He had this willingness to face the facts. He had this willingness to face the facts, to recognize where he was, to recognize where he had come from, and even to think back and go, even my father's servants are better off than I am. My father's servants have a roof over their head. They have more than enough food. And then we see this third thing, this willingness for him to return to the Father and repent. I just get this picture of him out there slopping the pigs, feeding the pigs, desiring their food, and he's thinking through all this and what the hired servants have. And then he says this. He says, I know, I'm going to go back to my Father, and I'm going to say, Father, I've sinned against heaven. I've sinned against you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Please bring me on as one of your servants. So let's do a quick flip here and let's look at the older son. We just really get a brief glimpse of him in the first couple of verses where it says a man had two sons. One of them is the younger son, one of them is the older son. We don't see him again till verse, 25. And so in verse 25, the younger brother's already been gone, squandered everything, has come back home. We don't know what amount of time this is. But it says the older son was out in the field working, taking care of things, doing what he was supposed to do, being the responsible one. And he shows back up, and there's a party happening at home. And he had no idea that there had been a party planned. And so he immediately sees one of the servants, and he goes, what is going on? What's the party about? And the servant tells him, your brother that we thought was dead, he's back home. We're having a party. And what do we see the older brother do? How does he respond? He's angry. He even pouted. It says he refused to go in the house. He refused to be any part of it. There's even this jealousy that creeps into it when he says, Dad, I've been here the whole time. I've never done anything that you haven't asked me to do. And in that amount of time, you've never even given me a young goat to have a cookout with my friends. Now, we don't really hear much other than that about what happens with him and what his response is after that point. But let's look at how the father responded to him. In that moment with the older son, what's the father's response? He goes out to him. He says, we have to do this. We have to celebrate. He was dead. Now he's alive. He reassures him. He says, you still have everything that you've been entitled to. This is still yours. Everything I have is yours. You've lost nothing in this. But you've gained a brother back. I've gained a son back. We've gained a family back. But here's where I really want to focus in for a moment. Let's look at the father's response to the younger son. The father's response to the younger son. You think about how the father could have responded. You think about that again. In a sense, the son was saying, Dad, you're dead to me. And he took everything that his dad had worked for, accumulated, the wealth that he had, and he took that and he blew it all, squandered it all. But how does the father respond? First, the father is waiting and looking for him to return. The father is waiting and looking for him to return. I just get this picture of this older gentleman sitting on a porch in a rocking chair or maybe leaning against the post that's holding the porch up. And he's looking at this dirt road that runs in front of his property, and he's looking this way down the dirt road because he knows that's the way his son left when his son left. And he's waiting for him to come onto the horizon. And then it says when the father sees him, and again, I just get this picture, that's exactly what happened. As the father's looking down this dirt road, maybe the son's behind him, and he just sees this silhouette of this guy coming down the road. He automatically recognizes this is his son returning. And it says the father runs to meet him with love and forgiveness. The father runs to meet him with love and forgiveness. Now, I don't know if you caught this yet. The reason Jesus gets to this story, past the lost sheep and the lost coin, is this is a picture of God. This dad is a picture of God. It would have been out of character, out of the cultural context for a dad, even in that culture, to get up and run towards anybody, because he would have been the senior member of the family, and so people would have come to him. He would have waited for them to approach. Not in this instance. He runs to his son that's coming home. And when we look at this in the context of this being a picture of God, this is the only place in Scripture where God runs. And it's to redeem somebody that had turned his back on him. We also see that the father rejoices when he returns. The son comes in and says, immediately it tells us, the son goes, Father, I've sinned against heaven, I've sinned against you. The father doesn't even acknowledge it. The father doesn't go, yeah, that's okay, I know that. He doesn't even acknowledge it. What does the father do in that moment? He immediately turns to the servants and says, go get the finest robe. Put a ring on his finger. Put sandals on his feet. In that moment, he's not saying, yeah, I'm bringing you back as a servant. He goes, I'm bringing you into the family. You're not some outcast. You're not just some servant. You are part of the family. And then in the midst of that, the father goes a step further and he tells the servants, he goes, go get the fatted calf. He provides this sacrifice to celebrate his return. This fattened calf, this is not just some calf that they had in their stable. This was a fattened calf that had been being prepared for some ceremonial thing that they would do periodically, where they would sacrifice an animal to God. The blood would be poured out as a sacrifice. The meat would be consecrated to God, and it would go to feed the people. And in the moment that father goes, that calf that we've been preparing all this time, this is it. This is the moment. We're going to celebrate this moment right now. Which is probably why the brother was so upset. I just want to leave you with three things here. I don't know where you came in at. I don't know where you find yourself at today. I don't know if you've ever felt lost, and I mean lost and separated from God. I don't know if maybe you've ever put yourself in a situation where you've separated yourself from God, where you maybe said, it's okay, God, I got this. Like this guy did to his dad. It's okay, I got this, I'm good. And I'll say it again. How's that working for you? How's that working for you? Here's what I want you to know today. If you're lost, if you're doing life on your own, the Father is looking and waiting for your return. He is looking and waiting for you to come to Him. Luke 15:20, I want to read it again. It says, so he returned home to his father, and while he was still a long way off, his father saw him coming, filled with love and compassion. He ran to his son, embraced him, and kissed him. And so today, if you're ready, the Father has a feast and a celebration prepared. There is rejoicing in heaven that happens when somebody makes this life-changing decision. As I said, you already saw some confetti out there on the floor today because somebody already did that during the first service. And if that's where you find yourself today, we would love to talk to you about that. Come to one of the prayer stations after the service. Find one of the staff members in the lobby. We would love to talk to you about that and what that looks like for you to take that step. Luke 15:23. And kill the calf we have been fattening. We must celebrate with a feast, and we're going to celebrate. And then I'll wrap it up with this. If you're steady, Maybe you're the older brother, you're the older sister, that's how you look at yourself. You're the one who's been doing things right, you've been playing by the rules, and there's some times you can get frustrated, maybe even jealous, maybe even pout. I would say maybe even more so for us as Christians, I think a lot more of us just get apathetic. Here's what I would challenge you with today. If you're steady, celebrate with the Father when the lost are found. You can be a part of that. You can be a part of that. Luke 15:32. We had to celebrate this happy day, for your brother was dead and has come back to life. He was lost, but now he is found. So today, as the Refinery Christian Church, today as fellow believers, here's what I'd ask you to do. Let's be people who celebrate life change. Let's celebrate when the lost are found. Let's pray. Father, I thank you so much today for this amazing reminder of how much you love us. That, Father, that it doesn't matter what we've done. There is nothing that we could do that is so bad that you no longer love us. There's nothing that we can do that will cause you to love us any less than you already do. But, Father, also there's nothing that we can do that would cause you to love us any more than you already do. Father, and when we're lost and wandering, you are waiting for our return. And you want to welcome us. You want to celebrate with us. And so, Father, we thank you for that today, as that's demonstrated through your Son. Amen.